As a teacher of mine was fond of saying, in science you seek the ideal, but often encounter the real. So in our previous video, we postulated the ideal based on first principles. We predicted how command and control beacons would appear in AC Hunter, and how this appearance might change as we altered delay, jitter, and introduced multiple redirectors with different host rotation strategies. Now this follow-up article delves into the real. We've conducted extensive simulated compromises mirroring all the C2 beaconing setups discussed in the previous video, and so today we'll compare our findings from AC Hunter to those predictions. Before we proceed, please note the following two important points. First, as the title suggests, this is the second part in a two-part series. While it holds some value on its own, we strongly recommend that you watch the first video to fully benefit from the content. Second, we're pleased to share that the datasets for all 9 attack simulations are made available on the blog page of this article. You can find that link right at the top of the description, so we encourage you to follow along in AC Hunter to gain direct experience in observing compromises firsthand. This also presents an excellent opportunity to explore various C2 beacons in our newest version of RITA, that's version 5, and you can find the link to download that also right at the top of the description. So it's our sincere desire that these two articles will help you develop keen insight into not only the appearance of C2 beacons in AC Hunter and RITA, but also how this appearance might change in response to varying key factors. Ultimately, we believe that the skill will help you recognize a wider variety of attacks so that you are empowered to keep your organization safe against them. So before diving into our results, let's quickly recap some of the key concepts from our previous video that are critical to interpret this video's findings. So as discussed before, most modern C2 frameworks allow for a beacon or implant, essentially the C2 client, in which both delay and jitter can be set. In Cobalt Strike, the framework we've used to generate today's data, we can specify the delay in seconds and jitter as a percentage. This percentage is then subtracted from the delay to create our expected histogram range. Consequently, a C2 beacon with delay and jitter will produce a histogram containing 3 important values: the minimum range value, the maximum range value, and the mode, which represents the peak of the histogram. So all 3 of these values can be seen on the x-axis of this histogram. So as we can see, the histogram's maximum value is equal to d, that is the delay. The minimum value can be calculated as the delay minus the product of the delay and jitter. Mathematically, we can express this minimum value as d minus d times j, which can be rewritten as d times 1 minus j. Furthermore, we see that the highest point on a histogram is represented by the symbol MO. Now, if MO is exactly halfway between d and d times 1 minus j, its value can then be expressed as d minus dj divided by 2, which itself can be rewritten as d times 2 minus j all divided by 2. So to recap, our minimum range value, maximum range value, and mode can be determined using the following formulas. Finally, it's important to note that in AC Hunter, all values on the x-axis are reported as whole positive integers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. In reality, network connections don't conform to this precise timing and can occur in fractions of a second. To address this, AC Hunter truncates these numbers, rounding them down. For example, a 2.2 second interval is considered 2 seconds and a 4.8 second interval is considered 4 seconds. We will account for this rounding in the final step of our calculations to ensure our predictions align with AC Hunter's display format. And with all that, let's dig into our results. Now our first dataset will serve as the baseline, i.e. the departure point for all other sets. For this, we are using a delay of 30 seconds and jitter of 25%. So let's go ahead and calculate our histogram values. So our minimum range value is 22, our mode is 26, and our maximum range value is 30. So now that we have some idea of what to expect, let's check in and have a look at our results from AC Hunter. And for now, let's pay attention only to the histogram shown in the top right, so let's zoom in on it. Upon closer inspection, we can see that our histogram indeed aligns with our expected values, with our minimum values at 22, our maximum values at 30, and our mode is at 26. Note that we've overlaid the bell curve trend line in orange here to emphasize that while our histogram largely conforms to this ideal, reality is often a little messier. And let's also quickly have a look at our results in RITA. So we can see that our connection was successfully categorized as critical, one of only 3 among approximately 100 different connections. It also received the rare signature modifier. For HTTP connections, RITA compares the user agent string to those used in all other connections. Since this was the only connection using this specific user agent string, RITA applied the rare signature modifier. Now this modifier should always interest threat hunters, as attackers may struggle to predict user agents on target systems without extensive reconnaissance. Many attackers are often careless when assigning user agents in C2 configs, as few defensive tools besides RITA and AC Hunter report unique uses like this. Note, however, that, as is almost always the case, this is not in and of itself indicative of a compromise. Misconfigurations, employee violations, or hosts with specialized applications communicating to a single external host can also trigger this modifier. Now that we've got a good feeling for our baseline dataset, let's have a look at what happens when we vary our delay. So here in our second dataset, we've kept our jitter fixed at 25% while decreasing our delay to 10 seconds. We can see that it results in a minimum range value of 7, a mode of 8, and a maximum range value of 10. So let's once again compare this to our results from AC Hunter. And let's once again pay closer attention to our histogram. Again, our values more or less align with what we predicted using our formulas. Further, our entire histogram has shifted to the left, just as we predicted. Although the scale of the graph has changed, we can confirm that whereas before our maximum range value, i.e. the delay, was at 30, it's now at 10. Now let's turn our attention to what happens when we increase our delay. So in our third dataset, we've once again kept our jitter fixed at 25%, while this time increasing our delay to 300 seconds. We can predict a minimum range value of 225, a mode of 262, and a maximum range value of 300. So let's look at the results in AC Hunter, and once again, as predicted, our entire histogram has shifted to the right on the x-axis. Our new maximum range value is now 300. However, even though our values all align with where we'd expect them to be, we can also see that the actual shape of our histogram has disintegrated. Our orange trend line no longer mirrors the results in any meaningful sense, and we can witness many localized peaks and valleys, i.e. noise. Any honest individual would be hard-pressed to call this a bell curve. It's thus interesting to reflect that despite this, AC Hunter still assigns a 100% histogram score to this dataset. And this is because, under the hood, RITA, and thus by proxy AC Hunter, uses a form of data smoothing to minimize noise and focus on the overall trend. So what exactly is meant by data smoothing? Without veering too far off into the weeds, let's see for example what happens if we take those same values from our original graph here and apply a moving average smoothing technique, averaging every 10 consecutive values. In other words, we are going to recreate our graph by creating new data points that are an average of 10 neighboring data points. And doing so transforms our histogram into the following. So as we can see, though the result by no means produced a perfect bell curve, we've ironed out localized peaks and valleys, and the result better communicates the overall trend we are interested in. Data smoothing is thus used to help us avoid mistaking the trees for the forest, especially when we are dealing with large ranges, as is the case here. Now that we've investigated what happens when we vary our delay, let's turn our attention to what occurs when we instead alter jitter. So in our fourth dataset, we've kept delay fixed at 30 seconds, while this time decreasing our jitter to 10%. And we can see here we can predict a minimum range value of 27, a mode of 28, and a maximum range value of 30. So let's look at our results from AC Hunter. And overall, we can see that our values once again align with our predictions. And if we compare this image with our baseline, we can indeed observe that the entire shape of our bell curve has changed. Our bell curve's height has increased relative to its width, resulting in a sharper peak, just as we predicted it would in our previous video. Something else that's interesting is that we can observe a single outlier that took 33 seconds, indicated by the green arrow, well beyond our predicted range. So keep in mind that even though this beacon was configured to transmit network signals exactly within the range of 27 to 30 seconds, the actual transmission time can be affected by various external factors. Once the packet is on the wire, en route to the C2 server, a variety of factors such as network congestion, routing issues, or temporary outages along the transmission path can potentially delay its arrival. So the presence of these outliers on our histogram underscores the inherent variability in real-world network conditions, even when the sending mechanism is programmatically controlled. Now let's see what happens when we increase our jitter. So in our fifth dataset, we've once again kept delay fixed at 30 seconds. This time, however, jitter has increased to 99%, the maximum value. We can see this results in a predicted minimum range value of 0, a mode of 15, and a maximum range value of 30. So let's compare this to our results from AC Hunter, and let's once again pay closer attention to our histogram. So here our expected values align nicely. However, as was the case earlier, we can see that spreading our data out over a large range results in the histogram starting to lose its archetypal bell curve shape. Now, of course, we could once again attempt to apply a data smoothing technique to see if we could tease the shape out. This time, however, we'll leave it up to the viewer to attempt this on their own if they so desire. And finally, let's see what happens in the case that no jitter is being used. So in this dataset, we've once again kept delay fixed at 30 seconds. However, this time no jitter was applied. As a result, we expect our minimum range, maximum range, and mode to all converge on a single point at exactly 30 seconds. So let's see if this is indeed the case in AC Hunter. And as predicted, practically all the connections are at exactly 30 seconds. In fact, out of a predicted 2,880 connections, a total of 2,859 connections were observed at this interval. That's a fidelity rate of 99.27%. We can also see 3 outliers, one at 2 seconds, one at 28 seconds, and then a straggler at 174 seconds, again underscoring the impact of external factors. And let's once again dip back into RITA and look at the results for this connection. RITA once again clearly identified this connection as critical, and in addition to the rare signature modifier, RITA has now also labeled it as having the MIME type mismatch. Now, a MIME type mismatch occurs when there is a discrepancy between the declared content type and the actual data in a HTTP or HTTPS response. Typically, when you request data via HTTP or HTTPS, the server responds with the requested data in the message body and includes a content type field in the response headers specifying the MIME type of the data. Now, in simpler terms, the server provides both the requested data in the body and a description of the data type in the header. Generally, we expect these to match. However, when they don't, for example, if the body contains JSON data, but the header's content type field reports it as image JPEG, well, this is known as a MIME type mismatch. Now, while it's often attributed to misconfigurations, MIME type mismatches can sometimes indicate potentially malicious activity. In C2 scenarios specifically, a server might send encoded executable content while declaring it as harmless plain text. So let's actually quickly jump into the traffic capture of this dataset and see if we can locate the offending packets. And here we can see the probable cause of the MIME type mismatch. We can see here that the HTTP response, that's the one originating from the C2 server, indicates the content of the packet body to be text plain in the header. However, while the body contains some form of encoded data, RITA actually compares the path extension to the content type. In this case, we can see that our path has no extension, which is not what we would expect if it were indeed text plain. Consequently, RITA has concluded that this must be a MIME type mismatch. Now, this discrepancy between the declared content type and the actual path structure raises a red flag, as legitimate text plain content typically includes appropriate file extensions. The lack of an extension, combined with encoded data in the body, further reinforces the suspicion of potential malicious activity, or at the very least, an unusual server configuration. And that's it for varying our jitter. Let's now have a look at the results from using 2 redirectors, starting with the round-robin host rotation strategy. So we're once again simulating a departure point from our baseline case. That's to say where our beacon has a delay of 30 seconds with a jitter of 25%. Now, in our previous video, we predicted that using 2 redirectors with the round-robin rotation strategy would result in a beacon that looked similar to one with double the delay, that is to say 60 seconds. In this case, we can predict our minimum range value to be 45, our mode to be 52, and our maximum range value to be 60. So let's see how well this lines up with our results from AC Hunter. Now our values align well with our prediction. When we use 2 redirectors with the round-robin host rotation strategy, it is indeed as if the delay was doubled for a single redirector. So the round-robin host rotation strategy does little in the way of altering the shape of our histogram. This is however not the case when we change the rotation strategy from round-robin to random. So in the previous video, we predicted that using multiple redirectors with a random host rotation strategy would create an asymmetrical histogram according to the coin flip model. We expected to show positive skew, that is a long tail, with actual connections appearing at multiples of the delay, in this case 30 seconds. And now let's have a look at our results and let's pay closer attention to our histogram. So we can see our connection intervals closely correspond to multiples of our delay at 30, 58, 90, 180, 150 seconds, and so on. The frequency of occurrence approximately halves for each subsequent interval, aligning with our coin flip model prediction. Finally, let's also see what would happen if we introduce some jitter, that's 25%, into this exact same setup. And one final time, let's zoom into our histogram, and we can see that the histogram maintains its overall positive skew shape while becoming more filled out. So instead of individual connection bars at multiples of our delay, we now observe small clusters. The graph has taken on a fractal-like quality, with the mini bell curves appearing at delay multiples. The amplitude of these curves approximately halves for each subsequent cluster, and as with our symmetrical histograms, the maximum range value of each cluster aligns with multiples of the delay. In today's Malware of the Day post, we concluded our in-depth exploration of C2 beacons, their fundamental properties, and how varying those properties affect their appearance in AC Hunter by validating our previous hypotheses with real-world data. Specifically, we examined data from AC Hunter and in some cases RITA when we varied the beacon delay, varied the beacon jitter, applied the round-robin host rotation strategy with 2 redirectors, and applied the random host rotation strategy with 2 redirectors. Now, overall, our predictions held up. We could accurately predict our minimum range, maximum range, and mode values using the formulas we developed. We observed that specific changes in properties led to predictable outcomes in our graphs. However, as is often the case when the ideal meets the real, we saw that reality can sometimes be a bit messier than our paper-bound predictions. For instance, when our connections are spread out over a large range, the ideal bell curve shape begins to disintegrate. Additionally, some outliers are occasionally seen due to the influence of external factors beyond our control. Regardless, being aware of these due to some first-hand experience will help us to recognize it, ensuring it does little to impede our threat hunting efforts. So we encourage you to not only download the data provided below and explore these attacks yourself, but also generate your own unique datasets by performing simulations with distinct properties. Use what you've learned here to make predictions and then see if you can more easily identify the attacks in AC Hunter based on them. Ultimate mastery results from applying what you've learned to suit your own unique needs. Now, we hope that this 2-part series has helped you gain further insight into the fundamental workings of C2 beacons, and more importantly, what you can expect them to look like in AC Hunter based on a wide range of potential properties. And we will continue our mission of helping you become proficient at harnessing the full potential of AC Hunter, ultimately helping protect your organization against these type of attacks. So we're grateful to be on this journey together to ensure your organization remains safe and secure.